Everything you know is wrong. They've been lying to my face. Interesting that they threw CIA in there. That was a Swedish rock group by the name of Easy Action. Right, let's get into the show. And I want people to remember this statement, because other statements have a tendency to slide. The US government won't issue so-called vaccine passports, according to the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. The government is not now, nor will be, supporting a system that requires Americans to carry a credential. There will be no federal vaccinations database and no federal mandate requiring everyone to obtain a single vaccination credential. Perhaps the use of the word federal might be a future cop-out by saying it's non-federal. You know how these people twist words and sentences. 2 women in Dublin, Ireland have been charged with refusing to go into hotel quarantine, better known as concentration camps, after arriving home from Dubai. Kirsty McGrath and Naeem Mulready were arrested at Dublin Airport on Friday, and their solicitor said his clients were not aware of the regulations before they travelled to Dubai for surgery. Now, the women were remanded in custody with consent for bail, and they appeared at a district court on Saturday, charged with resisting going into mandatory quarantine under the Health Act 2021. Now, under the rules, people arriving into Ireland from a list of 33, or very Masonic, countries deemed to be of high COVID-19 risk, or people who land without recently having tested negative for the virus, must stay in quarantine for 2 weeks. Well, it's always 2 weeks, isn't it? And the solicitor representing both women said his clients will be challenging the constitutionality of the legislation, and he said that being reprimanded or remanded in custody would be disproportionate, given the offence they are charged with carries a maximum prison sentence of 1 month. Now, the court said Miss McGrath had 2 children aged 6 and 10, and Ms. Mulready had a 7-year-old child, and they had refused to go into quarantine as they needed to look after their children. Now, identical bail conditions were set for both women, which required to provide €800 and lodge €500 in cash, and an independent surety of €2,000, which is roughly about $2,000, of which €1,800 would be in cash and €200 to be frozen in each of the women's bank accounts, was also required by the court. Seriously. And both were also required to surrender their passports and submit themselves to a state-approved quarantine on their release. And they will be required to stay there for 2 weeks, although they will be able to leave after 10 days if they can provide a negative PCR test. Fascism in your face, as we warned near 12 months ago. And people ignoring it until it all unfolded is the real problem. You know, the solicitor, or lawyer as we would say over here, is now challenging the law. They should have done that last year before it unfolded. And this is part of the problem. People leave it until it's too late and the horse has already bolted. And the former Crown Prince of Jordan is accused of trying to mobilise tribal leaders against the government, according to the country's Deputy Prime Minister. And Prince Hamza bin Hussein worked with foreign entities to destabilise the state, he said. Now, the Prince had earlier released 2 videos to the BBC claiming he was being held under house arrest, and he denies conspiracy but accused Jordan's leaders, Israel, of corruption and incompetence. Now, 16 people, including a former advisor to King Abdullah and another member of the royal family, were arrested on Saturday for allegedly threatening security. Now, in the videos, Prince Hamza, the king's half-brother, said he'd been told he could not go out or communicate with people, and the move is thought to follow a visit by the prince to tribal leaders where he is said to have garnered some support. Now, his mother, the American-born Queen Noor, has said she is praying for what she called innocent victims of wicked slander, and the prince is accused of seeking to mobilise clan leaders against the government. Well, isn't that what all opposition political parties do? It's what the Republicans will do in 4 years' time, is it not? Garner support against the government. But is this any different to lobbyists? How come lobbyists get a free rein to carry out what they like, but a person or a group wishing to do the same is declared a radical, terrorist or a despot? And as for the royal families, and it's about time all countries moved away from these incestuous monarch-style closed-shop rulerships and give the power back to the people. A Trump plan to cut food stamps is now off the table after Latex Man said it is abandoning a previous plan to tighten work requirements for working-age adults without children. And those restrictions were projected to deny federal food assistance benefits to 700,000 adults, a proposal that had drawn a strong condemnation from anti-hunger advocates. Not too sure that bill was making America great again or making America starve again, but there you go. Now, the US Department of Agriculture in March said it's withdrawing a Trump administration appeal of a federal court ruling that had blocked the planned restrictions on Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, better known as food stamps. Now, Trump officials had filed the appeal in May, 2 months after the fake pandemic had shuttered the economy and caused millions of people to lose their jobs. Not quite. It wasn't the virus that shut the economy, it was Mr. Trump. He ordered the lockdowns, with funding from a certain person not too far away, I might add. Now, hunger and food insecurity around the US has surged during the pandemic, with 41.4 million people enrolled in SNAP as of November, which is up 13% from February, before the public health crisis took hold. Now, despite that increase, the Trump administration told CBS Money Watch recently that it believed imposing tighter restrictions on food stamps was the right approach. Typical party politics of, look, we are the party of the people approach. The reality is neither party is interested one iota in the people. Otherwise, all those increases would not have taken place. And people have to realise they are self-serving puppets to the system. And if that was not true, life would be better here for millions of more people. So whilst they're tightening up restrictions on people who are short of food, the government is handing out money left, right and centre. Try 5 organisations with ties to Hindu supremacist and religious groups who have received COVID-19 relief funding amounting to $833,000, according to the data released by the Small Business Administration, which is a federal agency that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs. Now, the SBA gave the funds as part of its Coronavirus Aid, Relief and Economic Security Acts, and also the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Advance, EIDLA, Disaster Assistance Loan, DAL, and the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. And all 3 programs aim to provide economic relief to distressed businesses and keep their workforce employed during the COVID-19 crisis. And here's some of the names and what they received. Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, a Massachusetts-based company, received more than $150,000 under PPP and a further $21,500 under EIDLA and DAL programs. VHPA's Indian counterpart, Vishwa Hindu Parishad VHP, was designated as a religious militant organization by the World Factbook of Central Intelligence, CIA, for years. A religious militant organization, and yet they received $171,000 of the American people's money. Now, VHP is an affiliate of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, who are a far-right Hindu nationalist organisation formed in 1925 along the lines of hardline nationalist groups in Europe, which aims to create an ethnic Hindu majority state in India. Now, RSS is the ideological mentor of India's governing BJP party and boasts of having the Prime Minister Narendra Modi among millions of its members across India. The next one, Ekal Vidyalaya Foundation of USA, an organisation that's affiliated with the RSS, obtained direct payments of $7,000 and a loan of $64,500 under the PPP. Now, through its network of schools mainly in India's tribal and rural areas, Ekal Vidyalaya has been accused of spreading the RSS agenda, which is nationalist, fascist, Hindu supremacy, and of promoting anti-minority hate amongst young children. The Infinity Foundation is another one, another Hindu nationalist organisation with ties to the RSS. They received $52,000 in US federal funds in the wake of the virus, according to SBA data. Now, Infinity's Foundation's founder, Rajiv Malhotra, who is a right-wing author, is often referred to as the Ayn Rand of Internet Hindutva, as the Hindu nationalist movement is known as. Now, Malhotra has been accused of targeting academics and scholars critical of right-wing Hindu groups and issuing divisive statements. He's also faced accusations of plagiarism, though that did not stop him from being appointed as an honorary professor at the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. The next one, Hindu American Foundation, one of the 5 organizations. The Hindu American Foundation is a Washington-based advocacy group co-founded by the former VHPA activist Mihir Meghani, and they received the lion's share of the federal funds with $378,000 in PPP loans and another $10,000 from the EIDLA. Now, the HAF lobbies HAF to deflect any criticism from Modi's government policies on Capitol Hill, and the most recent being its vehement defence of the Citizen Amendment Act, which the United Nations described as fundamentally discriminatory, and India's scrapping of special constitutional status of Indian-administered Kashmir, both in 2019. And there you have it. Make America great again indeed. What a load of bollocks that meme is. 4 years on, sadly there's zero evidence to support that notion. And what is worse is there is a massive increase in aid going out of America to these special interest groups, largely to weaken America, not make America great again. And the point is, we need aid in this country badly. There are few jobs, an ageing population, a GDP rate plunging, foreclosures rising, bankruptcies rising, infrastructure collapsing, the standard of living plummeting, manufacturing almost gone, exports drastically lower than imports due to rogue trade deals, and vast amounts of our funds spent on a war machine that delivers zero benefits for the American people. We have to make these people accountable of where our money is being spent. Perhaps that's something to discuss in the activism communal gathering. The first witness in Benjamin Nutty Arsehole's Netanyahu corruption trial has said that he was told to make negative stories about the Israeli crime minister disappear. No change there. And the former Walla CEO Ilan Yeshua alleged that he was ordered by the news website's owner Shaul Elovich to post content that attacked Mr. Netanyahu's rivals. And prosecutors said Mr. Netanyahu made regulatory decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars to Mr. Elovich in return for favourable coverage. Now, both of them have denied any wrongdoing. But the crime minister, who is being tried on charges of bribery, fraud and a breach of trust in connection with 3 separate cases, dismissed the hearing as a charade and accused the prosecution of a coup attempt. Now, he's been indicted in 3 cases known as 1000, 2000 and 4000. And in case 1000, it is fraud and a breach of trust. And he's also accused of receiving gifts, mainly cigars and bottles of champagne, from powerful businessmen in exchange for favours. So he's a prostitute then. Case 2000, fraud and breach of trust. Mr. Netanyahu is accused of offering to help improve the circulation of the Israeli newspaper Yediot Aharonot in exchange for positive coverage. Case 4000, bribery, fraud and breach of trust, as the Crime Minister and Minister of Communications at the time of the alleged offence. Now, he is accused of promoting regulatory decisions favourable to Mr. Elovich, the controlling shareholder in Israeli telecom giant Bezek, in exchange for positive coverage by Mr. Elovich's Walla news site. The crimes in this country that has been committed goes way beyond one person. But let us forget, he is not an Israeli, but a Russian Jew. His real name is Malachowski. Out of the same line of people who ransacked Russia over 100 years ago, now ransacking the Middle East and America to boot. So the elections are going on in Israel, and here's some background to it. the usual skullduggery. And a senior Haredi rabbi has reportedly given his backing to a potential Israeli government alliance with the United Arab List Party. Arab, Israel. Which has now become a potential kingmaker after Israel's inconclusive election this March. Shem Kanievsky, who is considered a leading authority in the Jewish Orthodox community, gave an affirmative answer when asked about the possibility of the Israeli right forming a coalition with Israeli Arab parties. Now, the 93-year-old cleric and spiritual leader, of the United Torah Judaism Party pointed out that the ultra-Orthodox and the Arab communities were alike in many ways. Indeed. And Arab parties were more likely to find common ground with religious Israelis on issues such as secularization and family values, which would make them a better ally in preserving the Jewish tradition than the country's left-wing political forces, he said. Now, recently was the fourth election in just 2 years, which was held in March, but it failed to break the country's political deadlock, leaving 80% of voters unsatisfied, according to a recent poll. It's deliberate is why. And neither the Jewish right-wing and religious parties who back Benjamin Netanyahu nor the bloc of 6 centrist and leftist parties who want the long-time Prime Minister ousted were able to gain enough Knesset seats, I think I said that right, to form a stable ruling coalition. Now, the situation means that the 4 seats claimed by the pro-Palestine United Arab List party could prove crucial in swinging the balance in favour of one of the blocs. But the UAL, United Arab List, leader Mansour Abbas appeared to be in no hurry to choose between Netanyahu and those behind his main rival Yair Lapid. And he said, "I've not ruled anything out. That'll just roll on and roll on," like I warned before the election. It is how it works. But what is interesting in what is a blatantly apartheid-based country called Israel, one has to ask the common sense question of how they can have a so-called Arab parties to begin with. Does that make sense? No? Then it's a program then, isn't it? And then we come to another group of special idiots. And there was a meeting in the past week, and it was the administration's opening volley into diplomacy with China. And it turned out was an international scandal that demonstrated our worst fears being realised. So instead of opening like adults with mutual respect in public before straight-talk diplomacy behind closed doors, the US Secretary of State Tony Blinken, the new Jared Kushner, and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan went after China hard, only to be embarrassed in the end. Now, the Alaska summit was supposed to be the precursor to determine if the US President Joe Biden and the Chinese Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping should meet directly. Except the very first talk between the West and the East was a disaster. And now it seems unlikely the two leaders will meet. Team Biden had their first big foreign policy test with China and they failed, and there's no way to spin it. Even the media is saying the whole meeting in Alaska devolved into anarchy. You know, a meeting of world leaders was supposedly to determine if President Depends is going to meet with Xi Jinping. But how things turned out, it is unlikely that it'll even be considered now. So why embarrass the United States even more was the question in this report. And the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, just exposed how weak we are in dealing with China, and they know it. Of course, Mr. Blinken blew it. Why? Because he's playing to higher orders is why. Blinken is born in and born to. And so has zero interest in making America look good, like Kushner before him. He operates on behalf of Israel. Fact. And when will the media and the American people wake up to this in-your-face eroding of this country and its peoples? We got trashed on our own soil from the looks of it, and we didn't really respond in any way, shape or form, and we got rolled in front of the cameras. Now, the report says there are two possibilities for this. The one that seems to be generally accepted by nearly every news outlet is that Blinken and his team overplayed their hand and made rookie mistakes by going hard at China in the public eye. It was a disastrous blunder that may have inadvertently demolished any hopes of real diplomacy between the two leaders of their respective nations. Why did they do that? Because it keeps the war lobby in dollars and shekels is why. Now, the other possibility is this was intentional. Well, I never. And they knew exactly what they were doing when they called out China's human rights violations. They knew exactly how China would respond. They were fully aware that this would derail the efforts to bring the two most powerful world leaders together for a monumental summit that could determine the direction of the entire planet, and it all went according to plan. It is in the interests only of the Hebrew Anunnaki to not make governments cooperate. It's divide and conquer. That has always been their forte. And until we get people who are only interested in America's best hopes, not Kushner's and Blinken's, we're always going to end up with a bloody nose like we got this week.